This happened during the summer of 2015, and I had just graduated high school, and I still lived in my hometown. I was out with some friends, and it was getting really late, like around 1 a.m., so I decided to head home. I stopped by a drugstore close to my house that was 24/7 to pick up some aspirin and snacks. The one I went to was in the same parking lot as a supermarket. This is important. I parked my car close to the store and it was empty. There were no more than 2 other cars in this giant parking lot, and I was nowhere near them. I head in and grab what I came to get quickly because I had this overwhelming feeling of dread the whole time. I felt like someone was watching me, but I couldn't see anyone else there besides me and the cashier. Then, after I had gotten everything I intended to buy, I stalled checking out and just went aisle by aisle, looking at random things, because I thought whoever was out there would leave if I took too long. Really, the whole time I thought I was being paranoid, because I wasn't used to going out late. I had strict parents growing up. After 20 minutes of that, I pay and leave the store. I get to the door and literally bolt to my car, pepper spray in hand, and lock myself in. I turned my head to check the back seat, and right before I could breathe a sigh of relief because no one was there, someone tapped on my window. I looked around before I left the store near the entrance, and no one was around my car. So, how did I not see a person there? This is where I really freaked out. I don't know if this person was Ted Bundy inspired or what, but this was odd. He was a very handsome blonde man with slightly long hair and a cast on his arm. Now my first instinct was to drive off, but he was leaning on the front hood part of my car, and I didn't want to hurt him, so I rolled down my window down just an inch so he could speak and maybe back up just a bit so I could drive off without hitting him. But nope, he stayed glued on my car. He then asked me if I could help him with directions and look up an address for him. I said, I really need to go, sir. Maybe ask in the drugstore. They can help. Already went to the supermarket, and they couldn't help. That place closed at 8, and there was no way this guy has just been lurking around for 5 hours, waiting for some random girl's help. He then went on about feeling really tired, and if I could just give him water or food I bought since he had no money. I told him okay and began to reach to my passenger side to grab the chips I got and began to roll the window down slightly. And, like I expected, he moved closer to my window. But now, he was off the car, so I hit the gas. He chased my car and I heard a scraping sound on the side as I pulled away. I didn't drive directly home in case I was followed, and drove down the highway for an hour because I was so distraught over what happened. I finally got home, and my entire side of my car had been scraped from the door almost to the trunk. I'm really sure he used a knife or some sharp object because it was a really rough scrape. I reported the incident, but they never found him, or any similar incidents in my town. He was watching me the whole time, maybe from the windows of the store, because how else would he have known I bought food? I also think he hid behind my car so I couldn't see him when I came out. I feel like he was trying to get me before I got in my car, but I got in too fast. So, creep in the parking lot? Let's not meet again. This happened a long time ago. I'm guessing back in 2006? And I can't have been older than 4 years old at the time. Yet, I vividly remember the fear I felt during this encounter. It was an early summer morning, and the sun was up, but few people were out. In fact, the streets were practically dead that morning. my mom decided to take my sister, only 1 year old, seated in a stroller, and I to throw away some garbage at the garbage station. I might add that the garbage station is kind of secluded from nearby houses, bordering one of those deep, dark forests of eastern Sweden. Since I was only 4 years old when this happened, the memories from the incident have faded a lot. However, my mom remembers all of it. She says that upon entering the garbage station, she immediately got an eerie feeling of being watched. I remember that feeling too. I felt creeped out even though I didn't know why I was scared. I guess I could sense my mom's fear. Walking alone that secluded garbage station, my mom suddenly stopped and told me this. "Hold on to the stroller as hard as you can and don't let go, no matter what." That's my most vivid memory I have of this, and I don't think I'll ever forget those words. I'll at least never forget how they made me feel. It was as if my blood turned to ice. I just froze. My mom sounded stern, but even a toddler can sense when someone's scared shitless. My mom was definitely afraid of something. The rest is just a blur. I don't remember much apart from the aforementioned, so I'll let the rest of the story be told from the perspective of my mother. This is the recollection of her experience, recalled to the best of my abilities, but in my own words. Not far from where we were standing, a truck was parked with a man seated in the front. Nothing unusual. A lot of truck drivers stopped to rest by the side of the road. But this man was staring. He wouldn't stop staring. He stared right at me, examining my body with the determined gaze of a predator. Gluing the three of us in his sight, he truly seemed pleased by the fear he'd instill in our faces. And his eyes, they were something else. Almost as if they didn't belong to a human, but rather to a predator on the savannah. I felt like prey, stuck in the claws of a lion. I just couldn't move. That's when he smiled at me. I remember that dead smile. Those cold, calculating eyes. And the way he licked his lips. Almost as if to say, I could kill you if I wanted to. Back to my own perspective. I believe this was the point in time, into this strange encounter, when my mom told me to hold onto the stroller, to hold on tightly and not let go. My mom is a small woman, 160 centimeters, weighing only about 45 kilograms, and she could easily have been overpowered by the overweight man in the truck. My mom later admitted she was afraid he'd jump out of the truck and knock her out, possibly assaulting her, or even kidnapping me or my 1-year-old sister. We bolted out of there. We didn't throw away much garbage that morning. We just turned around and walked home as fast as a mom can do with a stroller and a 4-year-old by her side. We never talked about what happened that day. Up until very recently. The incident has always lingered somewhere in the back of my mind as that weird thing that happened when I was a child. And every time I walk past that garbage station, I get a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. As previously mentioned, this happened around 2006. Fast forward to 2008, the face of a 10-year-old little girl called Engla was printed across the front page of every newspaper in sight. She had been abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered. And the perpetrator was an overweight truck driver named Anders Eklund, now known as one of Sweden's most infamous killers. Anders Eklund was charged with the murder of Engla alongside the rape and murder of a woman named Pernilla. He's also suspected of abducting another little girl who's still missing, making him a pedophile, a serial rapist, and a serial killer. My mom says that when she saw Eklund's picture in the paper, especially when she saw those cold, familiar eyes, she knew he was the creepy man from the garbage station that early morning all those years ago, thinking how my mom, or my sister, or me, or all of us could have been his victims. That sends chills up my spine. Anders, even though you're behind bars, let's not ever meet again. This happened a few years ago, in my old, one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days. Like I was sure that food in the fridge was less than I put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor, stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat. Or so I thought. Well, one night I woke up around 1 a.m, sweating. And even though I didn't remember, was sure I woke from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower. So I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never close it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it, and a look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection in my screen that showed someone standing next to the shower curtain. It took me a lot not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off the holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I'm still kinda impressed of that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way to hot. And a few seconds later, steam was raising, and the water hurt my feet flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind. It was a woman. She screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it closed behind me. A little later, she started to bang on the door, but the door didn't give. Thank God for German quality work. I called the cops and went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife, just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw it missing, and realized there's only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to have been the former person living in the flat and was evicted after not paying rent. Seems she made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work, and sometimes at night. It's possible that what woke me up in the first place was her. And honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. I was 9 or 10, and this was back in the early 90s, when latchkey kids were fine and no one blinked an eye. I was home alone and decided to walk to my local Blockbuster, maybe a 30-minute there and back. I had done it before on my bike and wasn't worried or scared. I took off and got about halfway down my block when all the craziness started. Side note, unbeknownst to me, my neighbor's son was a drunk or drug addict, or something was wrong with him. My parents evidently knew, but didn't tell me because he was moved out a while back, I guess. All of a sudden, here comes a cherry picker roaring down the street going super fast. I remember because several other cars passed and this one made me jump and look up. There was a man, shirtless in the top of the cherry picker, hollering stuff like, "Woohoo, yeah!" and your basic drunken BS. I immediately felt uncomfortable, and before I could decide what I wanted to do, he saw me. He yelled something out at me and threw a beer bottle out. That freaked me out, and I immediately decided this trip was over and I was heading home. I turned around and started back towards my house, but nervously decided to start heading into people's yards to make it look like I was going into a house. That didn't help at all. He was already heading towards me. The driver was now slapping his hand on the truck door, obviously drunk as hell. They were yelling out to me with garbage like, "Hey little girl, where are you going?" I ducked behind a house and saw a large pine tree between the 2 yards, so I jetted out and ducked behind it to see if they were still following me. To my absolute terror, the guy in the bucket goes, "I see you hiding behind that tree, little girl." At that point, I lost it. I ran as fast as I could in a sheer panic to my house, backyard, and ran in, locking it behind me. I ran and checked the other locks and went into my parents' master bathroom and crawled into their shower and put a towel over me. I was sobbing. Called my mom and dad, who told me to hang up and call 911. I did, and they asked me if I was hidden, which was so terrifying. Nothing happened after that. The cops arrived right after my parents pulled in and acted like they had been home. I roll, but they're good people. The cops actually found the men, and they were arrested and charged with my stuff and several other things they had evidently been up to that day. I wasn't the only one they harassed in our neighborhood, but I was the only child. And of course, it was our neighbor's drunk and disorderly son. So yeah, bad neighbor's creepy son? I'm sure you're in prison by now, but let's never meet. Got some Dunkin' this morning, and it brought the story back to mind. Figured I'd share it here. During high school and college, I worked at Dunkin' Donuts for about 7 years and bounced around to a few different locations. I was used to working at the Dunkin' in my town, where we would get the yeast rings delivered periodically and frost them ourselves as needed. I transferred to a new shop about a half hour from my house with all the same responsibilities, except for the donuts. They were delivered by corporate, and they arrived frosted almost perfectly. They looked like the plastic donuts they show in commercials. Always round and not squished together, and they would dip them in frosting so it was evenly spread and neat. It was a busy Saturday morning and was close to Valentine's Day, so we had a fresh order of brownie batter donuts delivered that morning. We were slammed, which was normal for a weekend, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to see my manager, who I'll call Jeremy, running around stressed out. When he first ran past me, I didn't think anything of it, and I continued making sandwiches at the sandwich station. He rushed by carrying a pastry tray, and I watched him begin frantically throwing something in the trash, looking worried as hell. At first I laughed and just said, "Jeremy, what the heck are you doing?" He straightened out and looked absolutely beside himself. I had never seen Jeremy look so lost. So I asked what was going on and if something was wrong. "Someone filled the brownie batter donuts with staples." He told me he got a phone call from corporate that one of the stores in our chain, which contained 10, had somehow discovered multiple staples in every donut in their order. That was at least 48 donuts for our store, and more or less for the other 9, depending on their sales. They told Jeremy we had to get rid of the most recent delivery because whoever put the batter in the filler dumped a ton of staples in it as well. Thankfully, we hadn't sold all of the previous order yet from that morning, because it was still relatively early. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was going to be sick. What if a young child had gotten one of them? I pictured some family sitting at home on a Saturday morning, going out to get some drinks and donuts for the kids, and imagined everything else that could have happened after. I never found out what came of it, and as far as I know, neither did my boss. I'm assuming nothing happened because I thankfully never heard anything on the news. Makes me wonder if they covered it up. And I hope they were able to find the asshole who did it. So, Dunkin' Donuts terrorist? Let's not meet. And I hope somehow you're rotting away somewhere. I don't think my decision to stay home most of the time has been a poor one. Although the delivery here is starting to get quite scarce. They can only hire so many delivery people, you know. If this video was to your liking, then leave a like just to let me know, it helps me in the algorithm. Leave a comment telling me what you thought, and I'll be sure to read it and maybe even give a response. If you're new here, please subscribe for weekly content and hit the bell for all notifications if you don't want to miss anything. Now, I do also upload every episode to my podcast, the SilverThreads podcast, for those of you who prefer content in the audio format. If you want to contact me for business purposes, my email is storiesforsilverthreads@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time with another story.